No, I can be your clicker.
Okay. I can also just do that too. Hello everybody, my name is Tom Hammond. As John said, I'm an agricultural and civil engineer, and we're going to talk about pumping water today. Mostly from an energy and efficiency standpoint. The RCD has a grant right now. It's called the WIDA grant. It's a CDFA, and it's a Water Efficiency Technical Assistance Grant. And so we're going to be providing services in the form of overall pumping plant efficiency tests and a couple of other on-farm, like distribution uniformity testing and pump testing for sweep. In support of the sweep grant, we'll be providing some pump testing, and we'll be putting on a couple of irrigation workshops, both in English and Spanish. We're partnered with the Napa RCD on this, and so they'll be working with us as well. That's just kind of a brief primer. Today we're going to talk about pumping water and some of the common pumping systems out there. Just across the board, we've got wells and reservoirs as our supplies, predominantly in Sonoma County. We do have a couple of direct diversions straight off the river as well as supplies. Some of the common movers we're going to see are going to be submersibles and boosters. There's some line shaft turbines. Some of the common scenarios you'll see a well with a submersible pump. You're going to see a reservoir with a submersible or a booster, and you'll see a well with a line shaft turbine on some of those larger systems. Just starting out at the super basic level, this is a line shaft turbine. How do we know it's a line shaft turbine? It's because it's got a motor on top of it. Down below, you're going to see the pump. Some of the booster pumps you're going to see, this is a split case centrifugal, but that's a common pump we're going to see in the field. Another type is going to be another booster, would just be a actual turbine. So there's multiple bowls inside of here that are going to increase your pressure over time. So it's basically like multiple centrifugals all together. And then your submersible pumps with your motor here, your pump up on top, intake screens go here, and the water passes through. That's going to be something that'll be in the bottom of your well. Nobody really ever sees them until they break. This is what they look like when they're not brand new like these other pictures. This is just the motor piece. This is the transmission piece, the shaft into the pump, the centrifugal pump here. So what powers these things for us? Well, the ultimate power supplies are, you got the sun, and then you have the sun from millions of years ago in the form of diesel and hydrocarbons. Then you have geothermal, we have nuclear, and we have gravity. And we've been utilizing the sun from millions of years ago for the last 50 years very effectively to power a lot of our systems. And I'm not sure how much longer it'll last, but the closer we can get to the amount of sun that lands on our systems and utilizing that sun on a daily basis, the better. And we're starting to see that from a cost perspective as well when you start to compare the cost of a solar power system to the cost of a diesel power system. So like if you looked at a 100 horsepower pump requirement, you could power that with a diesel engine, or you could actually power it with a solar array. And the costs are actually getting to the point where in a 10-year time frame life cycle, you're actually seeing equivalent costs for those types of systems, which is pretty awesome in my opinion, because I don't really like changing oil in a diesel as much as I like washing a solar panel off. All right, so we'll go to the next one. We're going to dive deep into some eye charts a little bit. We'll try to move out of those quickly. But here's some energy densities. And when we talk about energy, it's just exactly, it's from the sun or it's from diesel. You can kind of skip over the majority here and just kind of go over to the dollar per 100,000 BTUs cost. And you can see that diesel is somewhere around 292. Natural gas is the lowest cost per form of energy. PG&E rate B, that's going to be a low use, medium size. So it's going to be over 30 kilowatt, 35 kilowatts. So it's going to be like, you have over 50 horsepower pump with under 500 hours of use, you're probably falling into the Ag B rate, which is the highest rate of energy cost, but that cost is around like $11 for 100,000 BTUs. And the significance of all of that is it's just a kind of a level cost per unit of power. But in order for this to really start to make sense, you have to apply it against the efficiency of that energy transfer to power. So we'll go to the next slide and kind of break out what is energy versus power. So energy is going to be the ability to cause change. It's going to be in kilowatt hours or BTUs. But power is the rate of energy, is the rate that's moved. So in between that is efficiency. Basic example is a power lifter, essentially lifting a weight off the ground. When the weight is just lifted and held here, it's energy. It's got potential energy to fall. But if they lift it above that distance transferred is work, and the speed with which that weight is moved is power. So that's how we kind of think about this. But you basically got your energy inputs, you got your equipment, so you got your diesel going into your engine, you got your engine putting out shaft energy. That shaft energy is then transferred to the pump to create water horsepower. The parts going out that are not doing work are your waste energy. And your efficiency is going to be your overall useful energy output divided by your total energy input. How we measure this with a pump in a pumping plant is with an overall pumping plant efficiency. And what it is, it's a testing method for determining the efficiency of your prime mover all the way to your water. So a lot of times it's considered your water or your wire to water efficiency. And that's in an electrical system. It's literally the cost of power coming in all the way through the amount of, it's the ratio of efficiencies for the amount of energy coming in versus the amount of energy going out. Why do we care about this? That's kind of the other key piece of this. And does it hurt to have a pump break when you need it? It's like it does. We don't necessarily value water as a very high, it's not, when you look at the spreadsheet of costs within your operation, cost of water may not be very high, but your cost of water in August during a heat wave, when you can't get it on, is very high because all of a sudden you just lost like 10 or 20% of your crop. So that's why we want to know what our efficiencies are. And if we know our efficiencies, we can also start to trend our overall life cycle of our equipment, because efficiency is going to go down as that equipment ages, and as that's just part of the mechanical system. Also, does it feel good to have low overhead costs? I think so. So what is overall pumping plant efficiency? It's broken into three pieces, really. It's going to be your motor or engine efficiency times your pump efficiency times your transmission efficiency. And we'll dive more into this. For relative reference, a diesel engine can be about 30% efficient. So just for relative scales, nothing's 100%. 100% is pretty much unachievable unless you're in a vacuum and it's all in theory. So diesel can be 30% efficient. Electric can be about 90% efficient when it's really big. When we start to dive into our driver efficiency, our engine and motor efficiencies, we've got our motor efficiency. Where do we find that? We can find it on the nameplate in the motor. That's the simplest. With an engine, it's a lot more complicated because you've got variabilities in there that are a lot more difficult to work with. Manufacturers will supply curves on those engine efficiencies. We can dive into those further. Just for relative reference, this is a pump nameplate, or not a pump, this is a motor nameplate, and we can look through and find our model name, we can find our frame, our volts, then we're going to find our efficiencies, right? Should have looked at this before. NEMA nominal efficiency, 87.5. And so that's going to be operating at its full load amps, which you can find over there. We can dive into that later, but that's just for relative reference, so you can kind of look at that and pull these. Diving into engine efficiencies. This is a chart that I think pretty well shows engine efficiencies. This is the fuel coming into an engine. This is the useful work coming out of the engine. This is all waste. It's pretty straightforward. There's a lot of waste in an internal combustion engine, but they're very flexible and they're very usable, and we've done an amazing job as humans utilizing them to their maximum extent. But there's a lot of waste. You can see there's a lot of improvements to be made. This is a engine curve. This is on the way to trying to obtain your efficiencies from an engine. What you're going to do is you're going to grab your fuel consumption curve down here. And some things to note here is that you've got torque. Well, actually, some things to note is you've got engine speed, you've got brake horsepower, and as engine speed increases, your power increases. As engine speed increases, your torque actually decreases, and your fuel consumption typically increases, but also as you get to the lower side of this curve, like let's say when you first kick on that engine, when you're about to do frost protection, and you're just idling that engine at 1,000 RPMs, your fuel rate consumption is oftentimes quite high at that rate because it's just bouncing around and it's not real happy. But once you start to actually engage that engine, it starts to quiet down, it starts to make happier sounds. It's usually combusting fuel more effectively as well. And so that's what this line is showing. From the fuel consumption chart, you can break that out, and let's go to the next slide. You can break it into an efficiency chart. This is an example where you've got a 100 horsepower engine. We've got multiple loads from quarter, half, 3/4, and full. The rate in gallons per hour of fuel consumption, and then the overall shaft horsepower that we're seeing at that load. 100 horsepower is really easy to do because the math's super simple. Ultimately, what we're seeing here is that our efficiencies at quarter loads about 18%, all the way up to full load at 25%. Switching gears here, that was all just driver efficiencies. Pump efficiencies are really pretty straightforward. You're typically going to pull that from a pump curve, which will be supplied by the pump manufacturer, and you can use that curve and it'll show efficiency on a lower curve. If you wanted to calculate it, because you didn't have that curve for some reason, you can use your pump efficiency by grabbing your water horsepower divided by your brake horsepower. And your water horsepower is going to be your flow in gallons per minute times your total dynamic head and feet, so the total system pressure, divided by 3960. And then you're going to divide that by your brake horsepower, which is going to be your engine nameplate or your motor nameplate.
Where's the 3960 come from?
It's the 3960 comes from conversion factor for GPM and feet to produce horsepower. So it's yeah. Also, feel free to ask questions at any time. If you have any questions about anything, you can stop me at any point. I have no problem with that. Just jump in. It's way more fun to have a conversation than it is to just talk. But all right, but keep going. Thank you, John. Let's do a quick comparison. We've got an engine, and we're going to compare a motor in a sec. But we've got an engine, it's 100 horsepower. It's got an engine efficiency at 25%, pump efficiency, so the engine is attached directly to the pump. Pump efficiency of 80%, transmission efficiency, direct coupled, so engine driven pump. Overall pumping plant efficiency of 19.8%, which is actually really good for an engine driven pump. It's but we can compare that to an electric motor driven pump. So we're same 100 horsepower. Our motor efficiency is more like 0.85, pump efficiency of 0.8. Our overall pumping plant efficiency is going to be about 67%. So when we start to apply those costs of fuel, you can start to multiply those by these percentages and see how those costs of fuel change. We're not going to go into that exact moment. We're going to jump into a real life example. This is a little bit more fun. So this is a project from 2001. The scenario was we had a natural gas powered genset and it was starting to fail. It was attached to 2 submersible pumps that were in a reservoir. The 2 pumps were both on VFDs. It was 150 horse and a 75 horse. And they were used for irrigation and some frost protection. The genset was about 20 years old. It was failing, so we had kind of 3 options. You could rebuild it, you could get a new genset, or you could change the power supply. Those are kind of the 3 options we were looking at. And one of the big pieces, one of the big takeaways is the overall pumping plant efficiency was about 6%. So it was total garbage, basically. It was in part, partially due to the variability of use. So with a generator in this particular situation, that generator is going to want to run at full load. And when you reduce that, you're still burning a lot of fuel to get that reduced load, and that efficiency is going to drop as part of that. Here's the meat and potatoes of it though, the actual costs. So the cost of a new genset, capital cost is like $135K. To rebuild the genset was $140. I thought that was kind of funny because I was like, you get a brand new one for cheaper than you rebuild it? But that was actually the way it was. And the PG&E supply, so the PG&E supply was to install a meter on the pump station and run, it was like 1,700 feet of line with like 8 poles. It was a pretty significant amount of work, but the parcel did not have a meter on it. So PG&E is willing to give you a little bit of a rate cut because of that. And then also because the amount of use, the 1,100 hours a year, was pretty high, they were also able to reduce the cost a little bit. But the key piece here is that 155 minus 135 is 20K. Operational cost difference is 10K per year. So 2-year ROI difference here on the cost. And the life cycle is also a really big key piece, because the life cycle of this genset, we're going to say it's about 20 years because it was 20 years. The rebuild, we'll give it like 15 because it's not going to be as good as brand new. But the electrical power supply is at least 50 years. Go ahead.
The genset here is a diesel engine?
Sorry, the genset in this case is a natural gas.
Okay, but it's a... Okay.
It's a natural gas powered, generator. So when you look at the overall life cycle cost, the connection to the PG&E power supply is considerably lower than all the other costs. Your upfront capital cost is going to be higher, but when you look at it, when you give it to the finance people, they're like, oh yeah, that's totally the way to go. Some of the common questions that I've seen come up just in talking about pumps and everything is, will a VFD reduce my power bill? And the answer is it depends on how much time you use it, because that pump, the more time you use that pump and the more variability in the use of that pump, the more a VFD will pay for itself. If it's a pump that's going to do 100 gallons a minute constantly for 1,000 hours a year, there's not really need for a VFD. But if you need to have that pump go from 100 up to 500 gallons a minute on a regular basis, and let's say it's split 50% of the time it's at 100, 50% of the time it's at 500, a VFD is going to help you a lot because you're going to be paying considerably less in power cost for that 100 gallon a minute timing versus the 500 gallon a minute timing. Another one is, can I swap an engine out for a motor with a variable frequency? So a lot of the engines, a stationary engine direct coupled to a pump is the original variable frequency drive. You can crank it up, crank it down, it produces more water, produces more pressure, and you can crank it down, produces less water and less pressure. And so they really met the needs of a lot of the operations in our area. Because in our area, we've got hills, you got to pump water to the top of the hill, and you've got big flat sections, you got to pump water to flat sections, and those are oftentimes require either different pumps or different pumping parameters. So to meet that, the engines have really helped a lot. You can replace it with a variable frequency drive with an electric motor in a lot of cases, but it really depends on if you can meet the rotational speeds. So like in one specific example, we had a engine driving a well line shaft turbine. So it went down and it was just direct coupled. And you could crank that pump to 2,200 RPM with the engine. We swapped it out for an electric motor because there was a really good return on investment in the motor, but the engine was failing, so we needed to replace it. And you can only crank that electric motor to 1,760 RPM. All of a sudden that pump couldn't do 2,200 gallons a minute. It was trying to do at peak timing. So those are some considerations to take into consideration when wanting to swap out equipment. All right, that's kind of a deep dive, but that's going to pretty much sum up the presentations. Are there any general questions? Oh yeah, I forgot to talk about the wheat ground conference. I talked about it a little bit at the beginning of the presentation. We've got some water system evaluation and efficiency testing availability. So what that entails is that you would give us a call at the Sonoma RCD. and we would set you up for a appointment. We would come out and we can do some DU evaluations. We can go through your pumping system, take a look at it, provide you with an overall pumping plan efficiency and a system report. That's an offering that we're providing. Another one we would, this one falls more into the dairies. It's not quite as much vineyards, but we are also offering to develop management plans for either irrigation water, nutrients, or soil health. And then pump efficiency testing in support of the SWEEP grants. It's also another offering we have going. And then we will be doing irrigation workshop. We'll be doing 2 per year for 3 years, 1 in Spanish, 1 in English. So if you would like to attend, if you have people that you would like to attend, you can sign them up. It's this is a no cost irrigation efficiency training.
Are those scheduled yet?
They are not scheduled.
Where would we find information on those?
We will have something up on the Sonoma Resource Conservation website soon. We don't have those up yet because we're still waiting for the funding to finalize and the contract to sign, but that will be up there soon.
You talked about the inefficiency of whatever the green arrow was going across there and the red one's coming down. Can you capture the waste energy that's generated there and plow it back in again? Or?
That's how you make a more efficient engine, correct? Yeah. So if you were to take your engine, let's say you were to take your engine that's combusting fuel and stick it in a dryer room and then harvest the heat off of that to dry a product. You can take that heat and use it for things. You can take that heat and then pump it into something that needed heat.
Okay. But it's not the same system. You can't do it for the same system.
No, it wouldn't. To the best of my knowledge, there isn't an easy way to do that without some really big modifications to the way engines would work.
You talked about 100 horsepower. Most of us are running, a submersible, maybe 1.5, 2 horsepower, and maybe a booster pump of 1 horsepower. Can you make some comments about efficiencies of those kinds of things, or should we be worried about it?
Well, so the general trends, as pumps get smaller, they're less efficient. As pumps get smaller, they consume less power, and so there's less of a. I usually like to think of the interactions that we have with a lot of our infrastructure is at the dollar level. So our interaction is, wow, that's a high power bill. What's going on here? And so with a smaller power bill and a smaller pumping system, it can sometimes just sort of fly under the radar. It's like, oh, that's not that important. But it is good to keep an eye on those and keep kind of a maintenance log on those, because again, the highest cost you'll see for water is when you need it. And so that's kind of that's that piece. But in general, the larger the system, the more efficient you can gain. The smaller system, typically the less efficient you're going to see. But you can have a small system that is at the peak of its efficiency and it's functioning really well, but it still may have a low efficiency compared to a large system. Does that help? Or?
Yeah. We're in an area where the well supplies are low. I can't pump more than 10 or 12, maybe 15 gallons per minute.
Yeah.
So, you got a submersible, and there's not a hell of a lot you can do to increase your efficiency.
Yeah. One thing that we, some of the things we've seen in the past with low well supplies is we've put well sounders on the wells and seen that at night the water table came up. This happened to be in Napa, and during the day the water table would drop below the well. That was during the day. During the night, it would come up about 100 feet, and all of a sudden it was within capacity of our pump. And this was just the diurnal shift between pumping during the day, not pumping at night of the users in that aquifer. And so adding bits of technology like that to your system can be a pretty big performance enhancement. It did mean that everybody had to irrigate at night on that particular site, which was its own fiasco, but it did allow water to get flow, which is pretty amazing. So there are certain pieces of technology that you can apply, and I'm a pretty big proponent of having the right tech in the right place for the right size. And so it's one of those where you can have a smaller vineyard and have simpler technology be a bigger help than maybe a really advanced, expensive technology applied in that situation. But it really does come down to like the cost economics of how much you want, how granular of the data that you want to see that's coming back.
One of your tables at the beginning, you showed the difference in cost per 100,000 BTUs between diesel and electric. And then if you take that to the efficiency, how do we know what our pumping costs are from that? So if diesel is 20% and electric is 67%, but the costs are very different. Are they equal in cost at the end of the day, or the water we're pumping?
In short, I would answer yes. So it's a matter of multiplying. It's a matter of following the units. And so if you've got BTUs per hour, and you can convert that into kilowatts just for your power bill. So like if you have a power bill and you're paying 38 cents a kilowatt for your power, and you're consuming 100 horsepower worth of, I'm using 100 because it's just simple math in my head, but it's 100, that would be 0.746 kilowatts, and then you can multiply by the hours of use, and so that hours of use is going to then drive the total cost. And so as hours of use increase, the rate of return on making changes or making investments at that rate also increases. So if you have the general trend I've seen across a lot of pumping systems is that if you're using your system more than 700 hours a year, you can oftentimes start to see efficiency gains by swapping out your power supply, let's say from diesel to electric. There's oftentimes a rate of return on that you can start to see over that amount of pumping hours, because it's the total volume of use that will then drive your ability to harvest money that can then be used for changing it. Does that help answer that? I didn't dive into that a lot in this presentation because it's really dependent on time, and it gets really detailed into the specific scenario of it, and you can get lost in the weeds really fast. but in short, it's a really straight conversion.
How much does it cost to do a pump efficiency test with the RCD?
That's a great question. We're still trying to figure that out. Which isn't a great answer, but right now our standard costs are 15% of the system. So if you want us to come out and evaluate 15 pumps, we can put together a quote, we can put together a little summary, and it's typically 15% of the actual cost of what we would expect to spend. So it's extremely low cost technical assistance.
That's required for a sweep grant.
Correct. Yeah, sorry, and then, the pump efficiency test is, exactly. And we can provide the same form that you'll need for a sweep efficiency, or the sweep grant. All right, thank you all, I appreciate it.
Thanks, Don.
Oh, which one? This thing? Oh, okay.
Okay, I can use this.
So I'm a professor. I feel like if I don't have a podium in front of me, Okay, so
Yeah, I've got one.
our next speaker is going to be talking about compost. Stewart, I'm going to let you introduce yourself.
Sure.
The couple of things I did want to mention, though, is so sweep grant, that application process is closed due to budget constraints. They're going to open it back up sometime later. However, it would have been right around this time that applications would have been accepted. So start thinking about sweep grants for next year. That's a very involved process. Takes a lot of information. You need to work with Tom to get one of those WIDA assessments. And then healthy soils, that application process opens up on the 22nd of this month. So coming up pretty quick. The process is pretty easy to do. You probably still have time to do it. Once the application process opens, it's first come, first serve. So the money tends to go fast. Plus, there's less money this year than in previous years. So, but some places to look would be the CDFA. Just search SWEEP grant or Healthy Soils Program. Easy internet search pops them up pretty quick. And then, yeah, I think you have a sign-in sheet for Healthy Soils.
Yeah, I got Healthy Soils. So
in the back of the room, so the name and email for Stewart's List.
It'll save the group a little bit of money because then I can use the grant to pay for my travel instead of you guys having to go. You know, so. All right, my name is Stewart Wilson. I'm a professor of soil science at Cal Poly. But first of all, we just had a talk. Why don't we all stand up for a minute? Stretch, you know. Maybe introduce yourself to somebody you haven't seen before, you know. I don't know if you got your downward dogs in yet today, you know, but the yoga.
Hey Stuart, actually I'm going to swap the battery real quick.
Sports hoodie on or whatever, and I went to Healdsburg High too, most of the time, you know, not always, you know, but yeah, right. So, I'm a hardcore soil scientist. I went to Humboldt State, UC Davis, worked for NRCS, worked at startups, and I work at kind of the intersection between soil health and soil formation, and I also do a lot of geospatial work. So I work a lot in like predictive mapping, machine learning, and stuff like that. But today I'm going to talk about some of our work on compost application to vineyards. With myself and a whole bunch of other co-authors you may recognize, Dr. DeCock and Dr. Lascano from Poly and Davis. All right, so today we're going to go over soil health and some potential benefits from compost. We're going to discuss a trial from a little while back up in Lake County that's a compost to rangelands project. Compost to vineyards project. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the results from a compost to rangelands project, just to give you some context about why site matters, right? So the two things I'm going to talk about the most today are going to be rate, right? So compost application rate. And the other thing I'm going to talk about is site characteristics, right? Think about your terroir, right? The characteristics of the soil at your location are going to influence the outcomes of your management objectives, right? So those are the two things, rate and site. We're going to talk about some potential opportunities, some collaborations, potentially, some kind of new directions of research that I'm looking for help from all of you on. So, mentioned the Healthy Soils Program. That was part of the Senate bill. Basically provides funding from the cap and trade funds, right? So from some of the carbon investment funds to implement soil health practices in agricultural and rangelands in California, right? So what is soil health? Actually, why don't we ask you all before we go, what do you think of as soil health? Does anyone want to try and answer that? I mean, I can stand up here and I already know what it is. It's not going to help me to tell you, you know? And it's also really poorly defined, so feel free. Who's got it? Who wants to say what they think soil health is? Yeah?
Soil that smells good?
Soil that smells good, I like it. Yeah, how about you?
Soil with high amounts of organic matter.
So organic matter, right? Organic matter drives the soil food web, right? It aggregates soil, kind of holds things together.
Soil structure.
Structure, right? How well does that soil hold up under irrigation and rainwater? How well does it hold water, right? So soil structure is really integral to water holding capacity. Really, it's like your own health. Like, how do you define your own health, right? It's the new year. I'm trying to walk 10 minutes after every meal. That was my New Year's resolution health thing, you know. So we're all trying to be healthy, but it means different things to different people, right? It means different things depending on what your personal characteristics are. NRCS definition is the continued capacity of a soil to function as a vital living ecosystem that sustains plants, animals, and humans. So it's this idea of a holistic view of soil, right? It's the idea of soil as being able to support many different aspects, right? Not only the production of a high-value crop, but water provisioning, carbon sequestration, gas exchange, the ability to sustain communities, right? If you think about it, we're all, in agriculture in Sonoma County, dependent on our soil resource, right? So it's something that's really important to think about is how do we maintain the health of that soil resource? So how do some of our soil health indicators, what are the things that we measure for soil health? Well, we mentioned structure, right? Someone mentioned structure. We mentioned organic carbon, organic matter. The smell isn't in here, but that's a good one, right? The sweet smell. But we measure these different things as potential indicators of soil health. It's not important that we go over all these, but water holding capacity, nutrient supply, carbon content, right? And then our terroir of our site, right? Our soil characteristics of our site have some overlapping characteristics. How deep is your soil? How big is that bucket? How much clay is there? How much nutrients are there? How much inherent organic matter is there in your soil, right? The terroir of your vineyard, right, is connected to the soil health through these things like structure, infiltration, water holding capacity, and nutrient supply. So this is from a paper that we published a couple years ago where we look at the interactions of our terroir, or our site characteristics, with our soil health indicators, right? What's good for the goose is not always good for the gander. There's no prescription for soil health. It's going to depend on your site characteristics. All right, so what are some ways, and feel free if you have questions, I talk all the time, so if you have questions, feel free to jump in. I will, after my first section, I will be able to have a stop too for questions. But all right, we kind of know some of this stuff, right? Compost is good, right? It helps things, right? More is better, right? It improves nutrients, water holding capacity. It stimulates the soil microbial community, right? So organic carbon is the basis of the soil food web, right? Once you put that organic carbon in the soil, it stimulates that system, right? It stimulates all that nutrient cycling, all that health, right? It's like eating your greens, right? It's like eating your kale or whatever, right, for the soil. Adding that soil organic matter stimulates that whole system to perform better. And we're going to talk about a little bit about that in a vineyard context in a couple seconds here, a couple minutes. So other general benefits, water holding capacity, et cetera. So this is another figure from one of our papers, just kind of looking how site characteristics can influence the outcomes of soil health. So on this, it's just a cartoon graphic of the infiltration rate on a coarse textured soil, so a sandier soil, right? If you don't have good aggregation or good organic matter, you're gonna lose that added water through, it's just gonna leach through, right? If you've got a clayey soil and you don't have good aggregation or good pores, right, good structural units, right, then water that you add is gonna run off, right? And you're not gonna get good infiltration. The goal is to get good infiltration in the soil so you can store water and so you don't lose topsoil from erosion. All right, so that kind of sets the stage, and so let's get into a little bit of the research. Any questions before I move on? Okay. So this is the results from a study that we did up in Lake County, in the Red Hills. Anyone ever work in the Red Hills at all? Yeah, so it's a pretty cool area. So this is looking at compost application rates to a degraded vineyard soil. So remember, I'm kind of harping on this idea about site characteristics, right? It's important to know in this study that we were working with a pretty effed up site, right? It had problems, right? It had issues. So the Red Hills is part of the Clear Lake volcanic field, which I can't help but nerd out a little bit here. So the Clear Lake volcanic field is a fault-activated magma center, right? So what happens is there's these pools of magma that were trapped in Lake County, also the Sonoma volcanics too, like Mount St. Helena and stuff, right? So little pools of magma were trapped as the Triple Junction, right, the Cascades migrated north. So the Sierra Nevada, this is a total tangent. So the Sierra Nevada used to be volcanoes, right? And just like the Cascades, right, like Mount Shasta and all that, right? But then as that Triple Junction migrated north, it left these pockets of magma behind. right? And these pockets of magma that got left behind are activated by faulting in the San Andreas fault system and releases these little burps of magma, right? And these little burps of magma are what we have up in Canocti, Mount St. Helena, and stuff like that. So one of these burps of magma is the Clear Lake volcanic field, which corresponds pretty well to the Red Hills, AVA. Okay, tangent over. Okay, so what do we have? We had highly erosive, highly weathered volcanic soils, right? So these are really, really red, really eroded, high iron content soils. They made some poor choices in site preparation back in the early 2000s. And they did a lot of kind of terraforming, and they just kind of lost their A horizon, right? So they lost that surface enriched horizon. So they're basically farming a B horizon, right? Meaning they're farming that subsoil, that really clay-rich subsoil. So they were implementing standard grower practices, fertigation, and these vines were just really underperforming, right? To the point of about 1.5 tons per acre. And this was a production vineyard, right? They're trying to push this vineyard for production, right? What's the old joke? How do you make a good Napa cab? With Lake County grapes. So that was an old joke that they told me up there. So anyways, they're pushing this for production, right? But they were getting 1.5 tons per acre. And they were shooting tons of DAP through the irrigation, and they weren't able to activate that system. So our approach was to feed the whole soil, right? Not just shooting tons of DAP through the system, not playing around with these different additives through the irrigation, but trying to activate the whole soil health of the system, right? And with that, we did a compost application rate trial, so 5, 10, and 15 tons per acre. And the idea was a single application to try and jumpstart the whole system, kind of get that nutrient cycling, get the microbial community turning around, get those nutrients in a way that could be used by the plants. But a single application to jumpstart the system that then we monitored over 2 years.
Is that just a surface application, or did you rip it into the soil?
Yeah, so thank you for that segue. So this was maybe not super practical the way we did it, but this was just directly under the vine row. So we had a pretty thick mat directly under the vine row. I'm sure many of you have applied compost before. Some of the CDFA recommended rates are like 2 and 4 tons per acre. It's fairy dust when you apply it like that. It's nothing. It's a little dusting, right? I personally think that the CDFA should be a little bit more generous with some of those application rates. Maybe I can convince them of that with some of my research. So we applied 0, 10, 15 tons per acre directly under the vine row. This was like a composted steer manure, something like a 16:1 carbon to nitrogen ratio. Okay, so what are some of our results from year 1? So the way these graphs work, you've got the compost application rate on the x-axis, and then you have whatever we're measuring on the y-axis. So these will be yields, pruning weights. This is petiole nitrogen at bloom. And the letters here mean that they're statistically different, right? So if they have different letters, then they're statistically different. So in this case, 0 and 5 tons per acre were not different, but 10 and 15 tons per acre were different than 0 and 5. Does that make sense? Right, so then we've got the same thing here. So for petiole nitrogen, 5 tons per acre didn't do anything, right? Didn't increase petiole nitrogen. 10 and 15 tons per acre did. This is year 1. And I forgot to mention, this was a fall application. So November, December, something like that. And then this is the following bloom, right? So this is just pretty short interval, right, for a perennial crop. So the takeaway from this is 5 tons per acre didn't do anything, 10 increased petiole nitrogen. Similarly here, 0, 5, and 10, this is petiole phosphorus in year 1. 0, 5, and 10 tons per acre didn't do anything, but 15 tons per acre did. What this looked like in the field is compost, green and taller. No compost, yellow and shorter, right? So that's really reflecting this petiole nitrogen, right? Along with that whole synergistic nutrient supply. So it's not just the N, it's not just the P, it's micronutrients, it's potentially some other things that we weren't testing. But at least this is showing that nitrogen supply. So year 2, some similar results. In this case, remember, we applied it once, and we're monitoring over 2 years, right? So it's a sustained effect. So this is year 2, sustained effect. So here we've got only the 15 tons per acre was different than the control for petiole nitrogen. And we have a nice stepped up graph here where 0 was different than 10 and 15 tons per acre. So there's more petiole nitrogen and more petiole phosphorus over 2 years from this application. But notice that 5 tons per acre isn't doing much. All right, so let's look at per vine yields. So this is year 1 per vine yields. We went from about 1.5 kilograms per vine to almost, I think it's 2.3 kilograms per vine. So more than a 50% increase in per vine yield in year 1. In year 2, that increase was sustained, right? So we got a 50% increase in yield over 2 seasons, right? So it's a sustained yield increase from a single high-dose compost application. That's the takeaway, right?
On really sick soil.
What's that?
On really sick soil.
On a problematic soil. I love all soils, just like I love all my children. So I'm not going to say that it was sick, but it needed some help. But these aren't like, gangbuster yields or anything like that, right? But the point is you get a sustained 50% increase in yield, which was mostly manifest. Yeah, go ahead.
Which 2 vintages are these?
I think it's like 13 and 14. So this is a little bit of an older study, yeah.
Why do you think that 5 ton per acre rate negatively impacted?
Yeah, so it's not statistically different. So it's just it's noise essentially. But where this yield increase was manifest was in the berry size, right? Which, for winemaking, whatever, we can have that conversation. I don't know what a good berry size is. I'm not a winemaker. But the yield increase was mostly due to heavier berries, right? So the clusters were heavier, the berries were slightly larger, or at least heavier. So you've got the 0 and 5 tons per acre, no increase in berry size in year 1. The 10 and 15 tons per acre, increase in berry size. Year 2, no increase in berry size in 0 to 5 tons per acre, increase in berry size in the 10 and 15 tons per acre. You can see a theme developing here, right? 5 tons, the CDFA recommended rate, isn't doing much, even in these degraded soils.
This is banded again.
Yeah.
Correct.
Right? It's not broadcast.
It's not broadcast,
Because
correct?
we've been doing 6 tons up there and broadcasting it and then incorporating it.
Yeah,
And you just set it under the vine row,
right.
didn't incorporate it.
It was, I forgot that little hoe implement. It was
Okay,
tilted a little bit.
All right, so you did incorporate it somewhat. And then continued, so how big was the band? This is just mind blowing that we shouldn't be broadcasting, we should be banding it.
I mean, it depends on what your goals are, right? And that's an important thing too. Like maybe you want a good cover crop. Maybe you want to, the whole system is important. This was kind of a targeted application to try and jumpstart these poor performing vines where standard grower practice had not.
So how big was the band? How high did it, at that 15 ton, that's a pretty thick mat, yeah?
Yeah, it was, I don't know, 6 inches or something like that, like along the vine row. Yeah.
So it was somewhat incorporated, and you continued with the rain and the drip, and that helped move things down to root zone.
Yeah, and they kept pushing all their standard, everything that they're putting through, yeah.
That's amazing.
And in the compost, did you have nutrients added in that, or that was just natural compost?
Yeah, it was a pretty high, it was a steer manure blend, so it was a higher nutrient, I can't remember, it was.
But you didn't add any other things?
No, I've got some other work where we did, but this was not that study.
But you had a high CN ratio here too, so are you attributing most of this impact to the nitrogen content, or do you think it's general contribution to aggregate and cell health and nutrients and
Yes.
biologicals and
Yes, that's the thing. as a scientist, I can't explicitly say which one it was because I didn't test for those things, right? What I did was apply the compost and monitor the results over 2 years. I didn't dig deeper. There was a petiole N increase, but there's also a petiole P increase. There was also cation increases in the soil. We didn't measure soil respiration or biological, so maybe that was part of it. My intuition, to speculate, was it was heavily the N and P response. These are kind of a P deficient scenario, but remember, all these nutrients, they're synergistic, right? You have the water, the biological cycling, the disease pressure, the calcium, magnesium, nitrogen, phosphorus, sulfur, they're all working together, right? So, and I think that's maybe the takeaway, and I'm on a tangent here again, right? Is that the sort of like, petiole N is down, let's add more DAP. Petiole N is down, let's add more DAP. It didn't necessarily work in this system because there was something synergistically happening in the soil that didn't allow that particular technique to work.
What was the tool you used to incorporate it under Divine?
I'm not exactly sure. We did it and they came in, it was some sort of a tillage implement, but it was this is not, this is like 20 rows or something, you know what I mean? So this wasn't like, maybe it was more like 40 rows, but it wasn't like acres and acres, So let me,
I'm sorry, really quick
Go ahead,
question.
yeah.
So you were saying that the grower continued on their typical and standard fertigation practices over all treatments as well?
correct.
Okay.
Yeah,
Just
so
wanted to double
we call
check
it
that I
grower
heard that
standard
right.
practice, right?
Yeah.
We took a couple little sections of a
Yeah.
big block, right? And so they were kept doing what they were doing
What
in
they were
that
doing.
block. Yeah.
Got it.
So these are pruning weights, because I want to get to a couple of the takeaways before we move on. But so pruning weights increased. You can see there's a kind of what we call a dose response. Some is good, more is better, right? Not like LSD though. Doesn't work that way. So anyways, so we go from 0.5 and then 10 and 15 tons per acre, right? So you can see there's kind of this dose response, right? So you get at more compost you apply, you get larger pruning weight, larger canes. Here's just an example of that. I mean, look at these canes, right? These are like 6-inch canes, right? So this is the control, this is 5 tons, and then you can see the 10 and 15 tons, you start to get that increase. This is my soil auger, right? So you can see you get a little bit of an increase, just for some visuals. I won't spend too much time on this, but this is the dose response. So you had a positive dose response, meaning more is better for pretty much everything. Nitrogen, phosphorus, pruning weights, berry weights, all the soil characteristics like phosphorus, etc. These are some of our organic matter. This is probably not super realistic because we have that thick band, right, in that row. And so we're picking up the signal from the actual compost not being incorporated and stabilized as stable soil organic matter. But what we're seeing here is a real clean dose response where the control is different than 5 tons, 5 tons is different than 10 tons, different than blah, blah, blah. Point is, you get a sustained increase in soil organic matter. This is probably a little bit artificial because we were sampling directly into that compost band. But still.
What was the content like? This is percent change. What was the content like, do you remember?
Well, that's what this is. The control is around 2.5% weight loss on ignition organic carbon.
It says percent change, it doesn't say percent.
No, this is percent organic matter.
Okay.
Total percent organic matter.
Okay, I can't read it from here.
Yeah, no worries.
So when you did that sampling, you didn't remove the surface organic matter when you're sampling for organic matter, you just went straight through the...
In this bitch, and I would do it differently now, right? But we went into it and we picked off some of the coarse organic matter, but we mostly just sampled it and sent it off, you know? So you're seeing that compost effect. And you can, that's what this is, like a band of that compost where the roots have proliferated in that band of compost. Right, so maybe it's completely just, you're building a sponge, right? And that's able to hold water better too. Similar dose response in organic matter in year 2. Olsen P, I'm really interested in phosphorus cycling, and these are volcanic soils, red soils that tend to bind P. We had a clean, pretty good increase in year 1, excuse me. And then this really dramatic increase in soil, this is soil phosphorus, right? Olsen P is a measure of plant available phosphorus in soils, right? So you got a pretty clean, strong response in soil nutrients. Also calcium, potassium, everything else went up too, with the rate of compost application. But this is showing that really clean threshold response, right? It's this idea that you have to overcome some of the limitations of the soil, right? And if you don't do enough, you're not ever going to overcome that, right? And that's what this data is really showing, that 5 tons per acre banded, it's not bad, right? But you have to have a threshold, you have to overcome some sort of limitation threshold to start seeing those benefits.
So when you're doing your soil samples, you're actually going to some depth.
Yeah, these are, I can't remember, I think it's
But
0
they're
to
way
5.
beyond just your banding.
Correct, yeah. You're picking up some of the band and some of the soil. I mean, yeah, some of the band with the roots have proliferated in. We incorporated it, but you can see this really red clayey section there. And these are what the soils look like. They're very, very red, tons of iron oxides, etc. Yeah?
Did anything grow in compost?
Um,
Was there, I don't know, one of the things that personal problem with the amount of dead space in the lines. But were there any plants growing in it?
yeah, there wasn't like some explosion in weed growth. You know, they had a, even when they did, and is that what you were getting at?
Yeah, I was just curious if there are a bunch of plants there or not, because you can almost use it like an herbicide application. It could be like biological inoculation, or an herbicide application, but just due to sheer volume of compost.
Like a depressive effect on weed growth, yeah. That wasn't something that we were paying much attention to, but I will say that they didn't have, I mean, the vine rows or the inter rows are like rocks and, you know, like, it's very, like even when they tried to do some cover crops and stuff in the inter row space, like they just had really poor recruitment and germination and stuff. So I think weed pressure was not very high here at all, so.
Question about the length of a study. Would you, by 2 years, were you expecting that every 2 years you'd be reapplying, or just, how long do you think the impact where would it begin to like be dropped?
Yeah, that's a great question, and this is the business of science, right? So that's how long the grant was. So, but yeah, that's one of the problems, right? Is that we want to be able to monitor these things longer, but once you can't pay to drive up there anymore, then you know it's difficult to monitor for longer. But I think that is a good question, right? Is how long will these effects sustain? Especially, tangent number 3, especially if you are talking about carbon storage, right? To mitigate potential climate change, right? If you talk about climate smart ag, right? You're trying to increase soil carbon to mitigate changes in atmospheric CO2. Well, how long does that mitigation last? 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, right? When you talk about carbon being stored in the soil, it's not an infinite sink, right? It's going to cycle through, right? And so maybe you can raise that soil carbon 0.5% or something, right? But how long is that going to last, right? And so it's an important question to ask. So thank you for that. Yeah.
Do you think the results are more driven by biological and chemical makeup of the compost, or the physical nature of the mulching effect, like reducing the evaporation in the soil?
Yeah. So I don't have a good answer, right? But what I can say is we saw nutrient increases in the petioles, in N and P, and other micros and stuff like that. So I think it's a synergistic, but we also saw this proliferation of roots in the compost band, which makes me think that there's some water is potentially driving it, right? This, you probably can't see it, but this is just, the roots just exploded in the compost band, right? So that whole system, better water holding capacity, check. Better nutrient supply, check. Some potentially unknowns in biological cycling, check, right? But we didn't take apart each of those things in a scientific manner, right? So I can't answer that correctly. But my intuition, NP water. All right, so let's look at some of the juice characteristics. So these are just standard harvest kind of metrics. This is as deep as we got. So we got this increase in pruning weights. We got this increase in yield. We got an increase in berry size. We got all these increases in soil nutrients. What happened with the juice? So juice pH was not significantly affected. right? So we got this yield increase, but it didn't negatively affect juice pH. Or I don't know if these are good or bad pHs, but it didn't change it, right? Titratable acidity, no significant changes in TA either, right? So we added this stuff. I know a big concern is you don't want overly vigorous vines, you don't want, methoxypyrazine and the herbaceous flavors in grapes, you don't want giant canes and then, green berries that never ripen, right? So no negative effects to pH, no negative effects to TA, and then no negative effects to Brix. So no significant impacts to basic juice metrics from these compost application rates. Yeah?
Were they all harvested at the same time?
Oh, the blocks? Each year, yes.
Yeah.
These 2 years, no.
Yeah.
So during year 1, yeah, they were harvested at the same time. And then the last thing, speaking to that kind of methoxypyrazine, overly vigorous vines, is the Rivas index. Do we know what that is? That's this ratio of pruning weights to per vine yield. So what's the ratio of shoots to clusters, right? Pruning weights to per vine yield. And so there was no negative impact in that ratio, the vine balance, right? The balance between shoots and clusters, right? So that was not negatively impacted. So shoots increased, but the clusters increased proportionally.
The shoots increased in terms of size, but not in terms of numbers.
Weight, yeah, excuse me, yeah. So the pruning weight, so really the size of the canes and the vigorousness of the canes increased, but it was proportional to the clusters increases.
Right, but if you've got short shoots, you're going to cut off one of those clusters. If you've got 2 on the long ones.
Right.
So.
Did that happen though?
Yeah, or did they keep everything?
No, this was just standard, like,
Yeah.
I mean, we're
They
getting.
didn't go through and thin.
Okay.
No, it wasn't thinned or anything,
Yeah.
yeah.
I don't think you can if you're doing all of these metrics. You've got to
maybe,
leave it
yeah.
as it is.
Yeah, you leave everything as it is,
But
yeah.
a short shoot's going to have smaller berries and more shatter potentially and all of the other stuff.
It's all
too.
it's all
Yeah,
relative.
like interconnected.
All right, so then the last thing is just kind of an economic analysis. These are old data, but the takeaway is we had a 50% yield increase over 2 years. So 50% increase in year 1 in yield and a 50% increase in year 2 in yield, right? No negative impacts to juice quality. These are some old numbers, but there's a net, if you apply the low application, the 5 tons per acre, and you're paying for it, you might lose money. Right? This is the takeaway, don't worry about all this. As you apply more, and you get a sustained effect over 2 years, you see a positive effect on your balance sheets, right? If you're increasing yields, again, these are 1.5 tons per acre yields, right? So if you get these up to 2.3 tons per acre, you're making money relative to that cost of the compost, right? So if you fold in the incentive programs with this, then you potentially are getting some positive free compost and then some potential economic benefit as well. So the takeaways are compost application, increased yields, pruning weights, cluster weights, and berry weights. 50% yield increase that was sustained from a single application over 2 years. Increases in nitrogen and phosphorus at bloom in years 1 and 2. Everything in the soil went up, basically, from this compost. And let's see. So practically, you want to apply 10 tons per acre or more, right? From this particular study, with these particular site characteristics, this particular terroir, you need 10 tons per acre to jumpstart that system, along with grower standard practice. 5 tons didn't do much, right? So 10 tons or more, increased yields, cane growth, berry weights, et cetera, without compromising vine balance and juice chemistry. And then it had some economic viability, yeah.
Is that a true 10 tons per acre, or are you only calculating the strips that you're applying it under the row?
It's 10 tons per acre applied in strips. So it's 10 tons per acre if you broadcast it.
Whole acre.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so, yeah, go ahead.
Did you say how old the vines were?
in the study?
Oh, I think I did, but I don't remember. It may have been.
Maybe you're right.
When the rootstock was there.
No, I don't have that in here. I don't remember either. They were like, I'm just gonna pull a number out. They're like 12 years old.
Okay.
Somewhere between 1 and 25.
Well, that's what they look like.
Yeah.
Do you have any evidence or experience with doing something like this on a vineyard that's not as problematic? Like if your vineyard's already, not in terrible shape like that.
Yep.
Are there decreasing returns on?
Yeah, and the herbaceousness and stuff. That's a great segue to my next slide, which is site characteristics matter, right? So this is a particular, I'm gonna answer this question, I'll get to your question, and this will segue to what I need all your help with, which is this idea that it's gonna depend on your site characteristics, right? The next, I'll probably just get to 1 or 2 slides in my next part of my talk, but another study that we're doing in rangelands and grazing lands is more about carbon storage, and it's showing that your site characteristics are really, really influence whether or not you're gonna get a response at all from this compost, right? So I'll just jump ahead. Something that I really wanna study is what you were just talking about, right? What's the interaction between this study, which is a rate study, and then your site characteristics? This was all done on the same soil type. What I would love to be able to find, and if any of you wanna collaborate on this or know of this situation, I would love to hear about it, and we can apply for a Healthy Soils grant. Is some sort of a condition where you've got some sandier valley bottom soils and then some clayier upslope soils that have the same like age of vines and same rootstock might be hard, but at least some similar characteristics. So we can explore rate and site characteristics together. So I'm looking for some vineyard setups where we've got some valley bottoms that are sandy and then some upslopes or some other locations that are clayey, so we can try and fold in that difference in texture, clayey sites versus sandy sites, to try and understand, will these results be carried over to something like where I grew up in the valley, Dry Creek Valley, where I'm on a YOLO loam, and it's just vigor. Everyone's growing Sauvignon Blanc and trying to just cut back the canes as much as they can, right? Versus an upslope, clayier soil that maybe vigor isn't an issue. So trying to fold in this compost rate study with some underlying soil characteristics that influence vigor. So sandier, clayier. So if you have a situation or know of a situation like that and want to collaborate, I would love the opportunity to write a grant and do some work on that. Especially because I'm local here, I haven't done any work in Sonoma County, and that's one of the reasons I wanted to come up here and give this talk is I would love to get back up here and do some applied research out here because it's been a minute. So
Put into your wish list or our wish list, putting your compost under the vine versus broadcasting, because if you're going to do it for a large vineyard or even a small vineyard,
right,
the labor to put it right under the row is so much more expensive than being able to broadcast.
That's
and you
true.
may have to do different rates then, so that would be
That's
whole
true.
different.
There's machinery to do that.
Yeah.
There's vendors.
Yeah, but not everybody has one.
You have a comment? Go ahead.
Maybe you could write a piece of equipment into the grant, which would just be like a side discharge compost.
Right. Yeah, like in some of these rangeland works, these compost trucks will drive all the way out there, and they've got these big old guns basically that they can just shoot that stuff on there. So your experience may vary with this. This is not prescriptive. Like one of the things that that I really want to take away from this as a soil scientist, soils are highly variable, right? You want to understand your site characteristics, right? Take some soil tests, dig a soil pit, right? Understand your site characteristics before you embark on really any major management objective. Sorry, you had a question.
Yeah, I was just wondering if the cation exchange capacity was evaluated in the soil before the treatment and after. I think it sort of touches on the idea you're speaking to, the differences in clay or organic matter in the site, radically different CECs and thus ability to hold nutrients in the soil.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, the CEC, I took that slide out actually. So my wife said that growers aren't to want to look at CEC, and then she was wrong. So my wife's also a soil scientist. So But yeah, so the CEC, it was, 10, 15 centimoles per kilogram or whatever, like kind of an average kaolinitic clay CEC. And the CEC did increase because organic matter has, high CEC. So there was some of that. But yeah, that's a good point. The clay mineralogy, which is what influences the cation exchange capacity, will also affect your results, right? And we can go deep if you want. Yeah.
Do you think you'd get similar results with just wood chips? I mean, that's a lot cheaper, and it does decompose over time. But
yeah, my concern with wood chips is just they're going to, especially in this site. I mean,
well, I guess I would say maybe, I know your experiment was for a problematic site, but for one that already has all these, microorganisms that are in the soil naturally, mycelium, all this stuff,
right.
Wood chips, and I see piles of it everywhere now that people have been clearing it for fires and whatnot.
Right.
But that's way cheaper than compost, and it will end up compost. It'll take longer.
Yeah.
But if you have a site that already has a lot of those populations in the soil,
right.
I would think that would break down quickly as well.
Yeah, I mean the sort of canned classic thing is that you're going to, with a high carbon to nitrogen ratio, you're going to essentially immobilize nitrogen in the soil for those microorganisms to break down that.
Well, at least what I've heard, and maybe I got this wrong, but say like wood chips, a lot more mycelium will colonize that.
Right.
Mycelium makes ammonium nitrogen more available, which is exactly what perennial plants need.
Right, so you'll get some white rock fungi that will break that down, right? And will eventually make that into some sort of a compost type material, but that, and mineralize those nutrients over time. But in order for those microorganisms to break those wood chips down, they need a certain amount of nitrogen to get going, right? So maybe something like a blend,
yeah,
like some wood chips,
kind of like a split,
Yeah.
Because now, if you're able to do that, that would cut down a lot of the compost costs as well.
Well, and something else is, what if you have an overly vigorous system? Then you apply wood chips to try and draw down some of the vigor, potentially,
Exactly.
So any other questions? So this is the paper. It was in American Journal of Enology and Viticulture in 2021. So I think there was a link set out with the newsletter if you want to take a look at that, but you got most of the main stuff here. So any other questions? I wanted to switch gears a little bit. Yeah.
Just one, and this is for the RCD folks and whatnot too. Has the SWEEP and Healthy Soils grants, have they changed to allow banding of compost, or is it still strictly broadcast only? Because when I had those grants, they would not allow me to band. They would only allow broadcast.
I'll find out. I don't know, but I'll find out.
Okay.
I don't remember seeing that communication. I don't know who's been
I was told, because I asked to ban from the folks at USDA and whatnot, they said nope.
Well, I think if you if you provide some justification, like cite my paper, then that might help too. And also, you've got a banding machine with a side spreader, apples and oranges maybe, or maybe it's like maybe not that different.
It was a hard no. They said
really.
It says broadcast.
Okay. So I want to take just a couple seconds to talk about, it's not going to be a couple seconds, I'm a professor, I talk too much, but about site characteristics. So we're going to take a journey down to the Central Coast to Santa Cruz, and we're going to look at these rangelands where we applied compost. And the only reason I want to bring this up is because we had this unique situation where we had two different soil types. They were a marine terrace, right? So you need to get the little wave cut terraces, right? I'll just jump right into it. So you end up with different soils because as you get uplift from tectonics, right, that you've got a soil that's forming kind of where the beach is, and then it gets uplifted, and then now it starts forming a soil, and then it gets uplifted again. So basically you have, everything's the same. You have the same parent material. They're all dune sands and stuff. But the only thing different is how old they are, right? So you get like a 10,000-year-old soil, a 50,000-year-old soil, and a 100,000-year-old soil, right? And why this is important is everything is the same. The climate's the same, the management's the same, everything's the same except for basically like the clay content. And so we did this study where we applied compost to one of the marine terraces at these a rate study, and then the other marine terrace. So this one's really sandy, it's like dune sands, and then this one's clayier, because it's had more time to develop. That's a takeaway, right? 2 sites, same location, they have different clay contents. That's what I want you to think about. So we applied, this was 10, 20, and 30 tons per acre. It was a rate response study, but what we wanted to know was how site characteristics, in this case clay content, influence the outcomes, right? So we've got these 2 sites. We're applying compost at 10, 20, and 30 tons per acre. Everything's the same across these 2 sites, and this is for a carbon sequestration study. And what we really want to talk about today is how does soil type and soil properties influence the outcome of soil health interventions. What's that interaction between the site characteristics, between the terroir of your location and your soil health management? Right? That's the area of my research right now. What is the interaction between how soils fundamentally form and how we manage those soils for crop growth, carbon sequestration, etc.? So these are the 2 terraces, or the 2 soils. One had about 12% clay, the other one had about 20% clay. So it's really sandy, really low clay. And what I want you to look at is the total carbon. So these percent carbon on the y-axis, compost application rate on the x-axis, and the different colors are the terraces. So terrace 2, which is the clayier soil, is in yellow, and then terrace 1, the sandy soil, is in purple. And what you're seeing here is you're only getting an increase in soil carbon in the clayier soil. Right? So these, the sandy soil, there's no significant increase in soil carbon. In the clayier soil, there is a significant increase in soil carbon. So let's zoom in. So these terrace 1, the purple ones, that has a capital A, capital A, capital A, capital A. They are not statistically different. So we applied 30 tons per acre of compost to a sandy soil, and we did not increase the soil organic matter. Right? So it's kind of an opposite story. But in the clayier soil, we applied 30 tons per acre of compost, and we had that clean, stepped up graph like you saw in the Vineyard study. Right? Year 2, similar results. No significant increase in soil carbon in the sandier soil, and then this really significant stepped up increase in soil carbon in the clayier soil. Okay?
These high CN ratio composts?
This was, yeah, similar 16 to 1. So the takeaway from this one is 20 to 30 tons per acre, significantly increased. But the point is, compost application rates and site characteristics are key to increased carbon storage from compost application. Right? So the rate matters, back to the initial point of this talk, the rate matters and the site matters, and they can interact. We applied 30 freaking tons of compost to the sandy soil, and it just respired off. But right up the hill, literally just right there, in a soil with a little bit more clay, or maybe a lot more clay, 12% clay to 20% clay, we saw these really significant impacts to carbon storage, right? So these prescriptive soil health practices that we have, what's good for the goose is not always good for the gander. You need to know your site characteristics, or else, in this case, 30 tons per acre, no carbon storage increases, right? Or in the Vineyard study, 5 tons per acre, no increase in yield, no increase in pruning weights, no change to anything, right? So we have to really understand the soil system to get benefits from any of these interventions practices, right? Otherwise, we're just pissing in the wind, right? 30 tons per acre, no increase at all, because it was 12% sand. And that carbon just respires off, it just burns right off, right? And so that brings back to what I'm hoping to implement for my next study, which is combining these 2 studies, getting 2 different sites with different clay contents in vines, and then running that rate response trial on top of that. And so I'll be applying for a Healthy Soils grant next cycle for a demonstration project. So if anyone's interested in collaborating, I sent around a sign-up sheet so I can get credit from CDFA for this talk. And my card is there too. So if you want to interact, I mean, I've worked a couple crushes up here. I've had purple socks, you know. I know some of my way around a little bit, you know. So would be happy to collaborate if anyone's interested. So the takeaway is, before you apply compost for soil carbon or for soil health or for plant health, your site characteristics matters, right? One of the things I always tell my students is know your site, know your soil. Dig a soil pit. How deep is your soil? What's your water holding capacity? What's the nutrient profile? What's the organic matter profile, right? Understand your characteristics before you embark on some significant management intervention, right? Understand your site, know your soil. The more intimately you can understand your site, the better you can manage that location. And you can consult a soil scientist. I do consulting too, so if you want to have me come up here for that, I can do some site characteristics. I do mapping, I do all kinds of site investigations. And so finally, the incentive programs. This is the one that mentioned was going to be opening in like the end of the month, right?
22nd.
The 22nd, yeah. So just next week, the incentives program is going to open where they will pay you, or they will buy your compost for you, and you can apply it to your site. And then the demonstration program, this is the Healthy Soils program. The demonstration program is for applied research and demonstration in compost to vines, and that's where I'm looking for your collaboration. There's other soil health practices that CDFA supports. Mulching with wood chips is one. There you go. Lots of other ones. This is their compost. Again, they recommend for trees and vines 2 to 4 tons per acre or 6 to 8 tons per acre, depending on the C to N ratio, right? And so maybe if we can get out on one of your vineyards and apply 5, 10, 15 tons per acre, maybe we can get them to adjust this a little bit and be a little bit less prescriptive and a little bit more data-driven. So I've already pitched you guys a couple times on collaboration, but yeah, I'm genuinely interested in finding a site with sandy soils, clayey soils, with the same cultivar on it. So that's what I had. Any questions? Sorry, I know that was a lot, but I hope you learned something.
Can you make a comment? The Healthy Soils program and the NRCS program says three successive years of application. Can you make any comment on that? I mean, when I first saw that, I said, this is sort of pushing it. I'm going to put 10 tons an acre on for 3 years in a row. Can you make any comments about why they made that kind of requirement?
Yeah, well, so, I mean, from a carbon storage perspective, they're trying to get more carbon in the soil. But I can say also that some of our other work has shown no negative impacts from repeated application. So these studies were all single application, monitored over 2 years. If you add 2 tons per acre every year, or 3 or 4 tons per acre every year, we've seen that potentially increase carbon, but not increase yields and things like that. So I don't think it's too much.
So it's a repeated cost, though. I mean, that's what I'm getting at. It gets expensive fast.
Cost. I don't think about that. I'm a scientist. I'm like, let's just, you know. But yeah, so yeah, well, they'll cover the cost in that case. But I don't know, maybe somebody else.
Up to a point. Yes.
Okay. Did you have a comment on that?
You know, I had a question. Obviously, on the rangeland application, you didn't incorporate it.
Right, that was just broadcast, yeah.
And you also, we did do some sort of moderate incorporation with the underlying.
Correct. Yeah, there was a little hoe implement. I don't know what it's called. It's like the weed management thing for organic.
Yeah, or something like that. But so, and it'd be interesting to look at sort of an ongoing compost application with no incorporation.
Yep.
And just because when you are doing no-till, you're not incorporating
right.
compost.
Yeah, I mean, I'm all ears to what the community thinks is important, and you know, we can work together to try some solutions out and see if we get anything.
I can give you anecdotal evidence on that, because I've done banding in conventional vineyards with herbicide strips and not incorporated it. I did the equivalent of about 6 tons an acre banded, 6 tons per vineyard acre banded in sandy strips within a really nice loamy soil and not incorporated, and I saw significant response. I didn't measure anything because I'm a farmer. But it brought uniformity in the vineyard up, so instead of my sandy areas being 2/3 growth, they were on par with the rest.
On both,
Or I
under the
applied
vine
where I did
and
not
what
apply.
was that?
I did not broadcast.
Oh, it was just under the
It
vine.
was just under the vine.
Just under the vine, and did you,
No,
coverage.
we didn't.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
So maybe this might be consulting, but I have a client in Lake County in one of some of those volcanic soils.
yeah,
Great vineyard, 4 to 6 tons an acre Cabernet, high quality, gets great prices per ton. He's super interested in increasing his carbon content of his soils.
yeah,
It's a sloped vineyard, 15 to 30% overall. It's all Cabernet, so in good conscience, I can't say ban compost because that's where I would go first.
right.
With humic acids, things like that, injected through drip or compost teas make any difference in soil carbon over a period of time.
Yeah, so anecdotally, from some other work, the compost teas did not increase carbon. I think that would be a good case for cover crops, because, maybe a combination of compost and cover crops to try and hold that soil in place. And also, plants are pumps, right? They're just pumping carbon, they're fixing carbon and pushing it in the soil. So if you can hijack that system a little bit to try and get it to pump carbon, that would be my initial thought, but it would all depend on.
I suggested that he was not interested in organic weed management under the vine.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, you could potentially be, it's hard to think what 15% looks like, but, they're applying other stuff that's rolling down the hill, so maybe compost would work applied under the vine, maybe the berm or something like that, yeah. I'd have to see the site.
yeah, thanks.
But you were saying you had a sandy site and a clayey site, right?
I know, it's a sandy site and then it's a sandy loam. It's like a coal loam or mesh river loam.
Okay, whereabouts?
Mendocino County and the Valley Floor.
Okay, in Hopland area or?
Ukiah.
Okay, okay, cool.
And I'm happy to collaborate if you're interested.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was just going to comment that another source of funding for compost that's not huge, but that we found is Zero Waste Sonoma has a 10% rebate for compost application. So we just finished year 2 of healthy soils, and so we were able to, they allow you to combine so we could get a little bit from that along with the healthy soils. It didn't 100% cover our costs, but it covered a lot.
I'm curious, what do the winemakers think about this type of stuff, or the buyers? Are they, and this is, I'm out over my skis and that's why I'm looking for feedback. Are they, if you are participating in these programs, adding 20 tons per acre of compost, are they just looking at bricks and root to shoot?
They've never asked.
What's that?
They've never asked.
Okay.
I think it depends. I mean, I definitely have my grapes and I definitely notice what growing practices growers are using and how they're treating their soil and what they're doing.
Right. I guess the old adage.
Maybe not as much, depending on more native.
Right, and a well-managed vineyard is going to be better in general, right? So the whole, best fertilizer is the grower's footprint, right?
No, but I think they just look at uniformity in the vineyard and healthy vines. If they
Right.
say you've got sick-looking vines, they say, I don't want it.
Right. Yeah, I think that's important too,
Yeah,
right?
so I think
Uniformity.
it's more visual and scientific up until crop.
Well, we're over time, so I don't want to keep anyone. If you want, my card went around. I hope you sign the sign up. I can give you a card too if you need it. And feel free to reach out. If you have any soils or mapping related questions, I love to communicate and just talk about different issues. And I'm not going to charge you, unless you make me come out and look at your vines and then everything. But yeah, the point is, I just want to communicate as much as possible, and feel free to reach out. Thank you.
Give us an email.